Welcome to the May 22nd OpenJ9 community call. As we do every week, we will open things up to any broader community discussion. So if there's any topics people want to raise, now is a great time to do that. We have two lightning talks that are set up to take place in the near future. I need to coordinate the exact weeks with Shelley and Lan. But if there are other topics people would like to discuss here, I think that would be a great time to do so, or other lightning talks people would like to give. So if you have thoughts or ideas there, please chime in and we'll get them added in. All right. So as we usually do, we'll open up the user-raised issues and take a look at some of the newer items that have come in. The first one is an issue where they are adding fields at runtime with a JVM-TI agent and finding that they're getting no such field and no such method exceptions. I know that we've had some support for adding methods, at least in FSD mode, possibly static fields as well, though I don't believe we've ever supported instance fields. So I need to take a little bit of a further look at the agent that they're using to see what we can support there and what we should be supporting there. It's interesting that this comes up as we've had more and more requests for this kind of thing. And I think it becomes more important for people doing development to be able to have a reasonable level of performance with more and more hot code support, hot code replace support. The next two issues were differences in behavior between us and Hotspot on when we generate JVM-TI exception events and catch events. They're being looked at. Hopefully we should have something in the near future. This next issue is a request for including vector registers on 390 in the DDR dumps or when running JDump view. The next one came to us from Slack, I believe, or sorry, from Adopt, and it's being looked at. Not entirely. Okay, didn't open.
So we can't recreate that one.
Okay.
It seems to only happen in a Docker container, and we're still trying to figure out how to get it recreated.
Okay. All right, then the other ones here were opened before the last meeting. The one other one I will call out is the IntelliJ idea out of memory at startup. I think this would be a good one for us to get to the bottom of, as it impacts how usable we are with IntelliJ. So if people have thoughts or have some time to dig into debugging this, I think that would be a good idea. Okay, switching back to the recording. And the other thing we'll take a very quick look at is some of the download trends from Adopt. So downloads are continuing to go up, which is good news. As we look at the OpenJDK 8, our 0.14 release has had almost 22,000 downloads. So that's a good starting point, but we need to be looking at how do we help drive those numbers up. And the Docker stats, I'm not sure.
Dan, do you remember what that number was last week?
No, I don't. It's something we had talked about, is we need a way to snapshot these numbers or to track trend lines, but I haven't had a chance to do that yet. continuing to see, high levels of Docker pulls, so that's good. We need to continue to work on that. Any other discussion on the downloads and user-raised issues that we want to talk about at this point? Then let's jump into some of our more regular updates. The 0.14.2 release is targeting just Java 8 and 11. All the changes for that have been merged, and I believe the builds have been started at adopt.
Yeah, so the 8 builds have completed and tests have all run. There were some failures which I've found were either intermittent by rerunning on a different test machine or were present in the previous release anyway. Some of the OpenJDK tests were failing on AIX and Z platforms, which don't appear to be new. So on that bit, also remember in the latest adopt release, we now have for JDK 8 the IST web bundling. So that's kind of good to go if we get confirmation from the community here that those results look good. 11 is in a little different position because currently it's having IST web also bundled in the installer at adopt, and there's much debate as to whether that's the right strategic thing to do. So that's kind of ongoing. The main community leaders have said that that's probably not a good strategic decision, but that's upset some other members of the community, so that's kind of being watched a bit at the moment. So at the moment I haven't submitted any of the 0.14.2 releases for JDK 11, pending what happens with that installer discussion. Another debate we might want to have is if the main thing that's going into this interim release from a user point of view was IST web support for Java 8, whether it warrants us putting out a new JDK 11 release at all. But again, I guess that's up to this community to how much weight they want to lend to the changes that a user would see in 0.14.2 OpenJ9.
I think my preference is, given that 8 and 11 are both LTS releases and we have fixes that users may, that we've indicated are important to end users, if we're doing the refresh, I'd be happy to put both 8 and 11 out. Even if IST is only put into Java 8.
Yep. So the follow-on then would be, would we be happy to promote the 8 ones and make them available now, pending the discussion about what to do with the 11 release and the installers thereof?
From a user perspective, it's probably easier if all the binaries come out at the same time. I wouldn't want to hold the adopt community back there, though, if they're ready to ship the 8 IST packages.
Okay, that's good input. Thanks.
I don't know if others have strong views in that area at all. Either people can't find their mute buttons or they're generally in agreement. So,
or they have no strong views.
Yes. All right.
Well, I have a strong view about 8 and 11 both going out, because that saves some rework on the documentation, selfishly.
Sorry, so you're in favour of them going out together?
No, that we will do an 11 and an 8, which I think, Dan put that quite convincingly anyway, to be consistent. I've no particular, it doesn't really matter to me. We know that 8 is more popular, so we could wait for 11, but again, depends how long the delay is going to be, doesn't it?
I have a personal preference to get JDK out. But
JDK 8 sounds.
yes, the 8 release, i.e. not hold it up for 11.
Mm-hmm. So just a general question on process. So are we saying the sort of release strategy is if we do a new OpenJ9 release between quarters, we should, for consistency from now on, make sure we release it on all currently active LTS releases?
Kind of depends what the release is for. In this case, there's a bunch of bug fixes in OpenJ9 that affect both 8 and 11, and that were all raised by users. So it makes sense to put out both 8 and 11.
Okay, so the next question on that is the strategy on issues raised by users as to whether they wait for the next quarterly release or it's something that needs to be immediately fixed.
I think in this particular case, there's a target of opportunity because there was going to be the re-release of the packages for both Ice-T and the Hotspot 8 builds were being respun. We said, oh, this is a great opportunity to get some of these user-raised issues back out to the community since builds and packages are going to be respun anyways.
Yeah, they're slightly contradictory, those two things, though. So since we're only going to, well, we're implying we're only going to do 8 for Ice-T and then package the other fixes because we happen to be doing Ice-T. But then we're not doing Ice-T for 11, therefore we're actually doing it. You see what I mean?
Yeah, I think at the time that we started this discussion, it wasn't clear whether 11 would include Ice-T or not. And so we have put these fixes in and have communicated to users that we intend to ship them in a
okay, that's fair enough.
package. And so having made that communication, I think we need to stand by that and ship those packages.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I just like to be clear. I understand. Just clear to understand in the future when in between quarterly releases what our real strategy is across the releases as to what we should be releasing and for what purpose.
I don't think we have a hard and fast rule there yet. Our preference is to stick to the quarterly release schedule. But if we find an issue that is affecting users or affecting their ability to adopt OpenJ9, and it's hitting a significant portion of our user base, then I think the responsible thing to do is to put an early release out or an interim release.
Yeah, I would agree with that. That sounds like a good enough statement. Yeah, okay. All right, thank you.
All right. The 0.15 release is targeting Java 8, 11, and 12. Release date is in July. The Eclipse plan and milestone links are there, and the reality check date is June 18. So, please be cognizant of the issues that are in that milestone, making sure that we're working towards clearing those out. And so I ask, in particular, project leads and all the committers to be aware of what's in there so we can make sure that we're getting the right things fixed and prioritized. All right. And then the JDK Next repo for Java 13. Good news that we have the sanity test working. We had agreed during the last meeting to disable AIX until the XLC 16 compiler support is ready. I don't know if we have any other updates on that or on where we're at with the build and test results at this point.
I think we've promoted everything. So we have the latest JDK Next. We have the latest JDK 11. Not sure if we promoted the latest JDK 8, but the only difference was a tag, so it didn't really matter.
That's in the OpenJ9 branch?
Yep. Right. And then for JDK 12, we're running builds, but we're not promoting because we don't want to take changes that aren't going to go into the next release 12.02.
Right. And that's because as an Oracle-owned stream, the changes only appear.
You'd expect, since 12.02 is the last release, that everything being delivered would appear in 12.02, but if we happen to pick up something that doesn't get into 12.02, then we'll have to do extra work to cherry pick a bunch of fixes, and I don't think it's worth it. We can still run tests on the staging branch if we want to keep testing 12, but really there's so little difference between 12 and 11 that it's not really worth the effort. Maybe of more interest is things that are going into Java 13. There were some things that showed up on the list of JEPs, although nothing affects OpenJ9, I don't think. And then there's a bunch of release notes for things that have gone into Java 13, one of which seemed to affect OpenJ9, so I raised an issue for it.
This was the deprecation of the -x verify none.
Correct.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. We'll see where that gets to. Are there other discussions we should be having around the release? We will skip over the actions from the retrospective, as we've been making good progress on those. And is Shelley on the call, or somebody from Adopt who can give us an update on anything that we haven't already covered in the release discussions?
I haven't worked on anything myself other than the release discussions we've already had.
All right, then we will.
We could still do with more machines, but that's a general statement.
Yes. I think that's a general statement for almost everyone. So this next item is mostly at this point tracking the contributor teams. There's been some work there. I've seen some prototype diagrams that or pictures of what the UI would look like that I showed off last time. But I haven't seen any more recent updates to that, so I'll continue to track that and hope that we can be early evaluators for it. In terms of machines, Adam, do you want to take us through your update?
Sure. Just to backtrack a bit, I went back and looked at last week's call for the download stats, so I added a little bit of numbers for the downloads there. So overall 30 versus 32 million, and we went up from 17,000 to 22,000 on JDK 8014.
Okay.
So we could at least keep track of it there until we find something more suitable.
Thanks, Adam.
Okay, so Mac machines, they're set up and tested. They seem to be working. Waiting a little bit to fully vet them to make sure that there's no issues before we send them out. Few issues. There's concerns over the network bandwidth and how many power connections we have there. So we're supposed to be following up with Charlie on that. And then there was a side note that these are going to be test only since they're a newer version of OS, and if you build on them, you can't test on the old OS. So. Not too many changes other than that. Keeping an eye on all the disk usage. So far, so good. And waiting for a review on a PR to fully enable those new pipelines and completely disable the old ones.
Does anyone have any feedback on those new pipelines? Has there been much discussion on Slack, or has the rollout gone smoothly at this point?
I'd say they just seem to work.
Yeah.
Maybe a bit slower with the uploads, downloads, but not sure that matters too much.
Yeah, my experience has been it's been pretty smooth as well. So
good.
Sue, is there any updates on the website design review?
Sorry, Sue has got some technical problems. There's been no update on the design.
Okay. Is there any other business people would like to discuss this week?
Adam asked a question in the planning channel about updating a logo on YouTube.
That's all right. I will see what I can figure out for doing that. Figure out how to update. There's been a request on Slack for Windows large heap builds. I don't know. When we originally rolled out the large heap builds, I believe they were being asked for on Linux, so we've only enabled them on platforms where they've been requested. Now that we're getting requests for them on Windows, I think it makes sense to enable it there as well. Does anyone have any concerns with taking that approach?
No, but I was kind of curious. I've seen some of the changes that Jack's been putting in around making it a dynamic check. Do we have a timeline when we think that support is landing? Just curious. I'm not asking for.
No, I'm trying to think of what Gak's timeline has been. Right now, he's been trying to make it work, and so I think we're probably a couple of weeks away from something that he can run, and then it's a matter of performance tuning it and seeing, what additions we need to get to something we're comfortable with.
There you go. That's cool. Thanks for the update on that.
So are we talking JDK 8, 11, others here, or just future?
JDK 8 and 11. We would probably match what we're doing for the other large heap packages as well. So that's probably 8, 11, and whatever the 8, 11, and 12, I guess, are the ones we currently have.
So I guess concerns would be a general one of capacity, that no more builds, more tests, and so on. But there's something niggling in the back of my mind about what would someone do for a migration plan if they got used to Excel builds and then we got a dynamic switch in operation later. That might bring a few issues.
I'm actually hoping it'll resolve issues, because it means that people who want to switch between smaller and larger heaps are getting the best possible runtime out of that.
I think they can keep using the same command line options, and then the VM will just do the right thing.
Sorry, I was thinking in issues in terms of people doing downloads and things they've already started downloading, and then we change all the names on them to get the same functionality, that kind of issue.
Yeah, the Excel builds will disappear. They'll have to download the regular build, but then it'll just work with their command line options.
So if we were quite close already to doing that, perhaps we could wait.
I'd prefer not to wait. because I think the turnaround time on being able to get a build compiled and packaged is much shorter than the turnaround on having these packages be something we're ready to ship.
Even when we have something working, if like Dan said, something like 2-3 weeks to get something working, we don't know what the performance is going to be like. That might require tuning and extra time.
So is this something we can assess closer to the what would be our next opportunity, July update?
Or we could put one out. We could put a 14.02 build for Windows XL. I wouldn't hold up anything to do that, but it could be delivered after the fact.
It's quite a lot of pipeline work implied by that statement, but yes.
Yeah, so I don't really know how much work there is at Adopt. Plus, I'm pretty sure we're running with like one Windows machine at Adopt as well. So
yeah, there's that too.
For what it's worth, I did run a personal build with the non-compressed option, and it seemed to compile fine. So I don't think there's any dev work to do on it.
Yeah, I fully expect it to just work as we pull that code in and ship it in both configurations for the IBM packages.
So if we want that as a concrete proposal, like I think the start point is an item at Adopt to add it to the pipelines. As I say, it's not trivial. Harder than it should be, let's put it that way.
All right, we'll get an issue opened up for that. Is there anything else we should be discussing today? All right.
So I was a bit fuzzy on what we're doing for Java 8 14.02 or 14.2.
So my takeaway from what we just discussed was just to promote the builds that I have just done. If you could confirm those test results in my analysis, Peter, that you can see on a Slack channel near you somewhere, then...
Yes, so I didn't see any links to test results, just some words. So words looked fine, because the way I read the words, it said no regressions.
Yeah, I'll point you at some things.
Okay, sounds good.
So just to expand on that, my takeaway was we will put the 8 builds out as soon as they're ready. And we'll put the 11, 14, 14.2 release out as well as soon as that's ready.
As soon as the installer is doing the right thing, yes.
Yes. Okay. If there's nothing else, then thank you, everyone, and we will we'll talk again next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.